not to
Check
align.
1, 2, 3, 4, 4.
But we'd have to submit the
1, 2,
changes to
3,
them
4,
anyways,
5,
you know?
6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay. Good evening, all. Welcome to the April 4th, 2023 meeting of the Growth Planning Committee. We'll start off with the introductions. To my left,
James Graham.
Dan Saunders.
Liz Johnson.
Michelle Radley.
Warner Gilliam.
Okay. So tonight we have on our agenda an update on our, actually, sorry, first review of the minutes from February 7th, 2023. Take a motion to,
I make motion, we accept them.
second? All right, I'll do the second, and all in favor? Hey, Paul. Number 2 on the agenda would be an update on the comp plan, and it looks like we do have an update. So I will turn that over to Michelle or Warner, whoever's going to
Yeah, I think
speak up.
Michelle's gonna run with
Good.
these, so.
Excellent. Michelle. Yes, it was to your attention, so.
Awesome. So yeah, we had received feedback on March 27th via email from Tom at the state on the completeness of the comp plan. We did receive back feedback that we were found inconsistent just by a margin, just missing pieces from the strategies, goals section of the plan itself, nothing really like from the content area. So this feedback that we received was encompassing of those changes that we will need to be making, and comments from state departments, as well as comments from a resident and the regional planning office. And so we received this feedback. Big piece of this is that the revisions for the completeness are going to be due on August 4th, which is 90 business days from the date that we received the response from the state. From there, then there will be consistency review 2 weeks after that as well.
So they did, so this review was completeness. Did we identify how we're gonna address all the elements in the state requirements, right? And then next step, once things are complete, they can go through and say whether we're consistent or not with the state.
Correct, yes. Yeah.
Hopefully they've done some of that consistency already, just aren't telling us.
Right, yeah, I'd like that to, and I think that'll be part of our conversation with the state, is that, provided that we do these requested changes, we just don't want to be getting a list later
Right.
on that says, oh, do these 3 things
Right.
for consistency now.
Okay.
And I do think some of these items, we may be able to we may be able to have an explanation, conversation on an explanation
Yeah.
on some of these things. As I look at some of them, I think some of them we didn't really get into because in our mind, we were like, yeah, we've done that.
Yeah,
But recognizing that, that the state doesn't necessarily know
Right,
that,
right.
to check that box, and so
so we may need to put it in there and point them where
it's
it's.
fair that it needs to say, yes, we have done this, and
Yeah.
here's how we've done that,
Okay.
so.
Okay. So we can respond in comments to that manner, right? To
Yes,
the-
yeah, I think so.
Is there an importance, I mean, they said you got 90 days by the rule to respond. Is there importance to that? Like, if we don't do that, does that like basically kick us back to the back of the line again for a resubmittal? Or by doing it within that 90 days, it sort of keeps us up front to keep moving things forward,
No, I don't know, but that's I would assume that it means that it stays on his desk,
Yeah, after 90 days, you're just off.
right? And after 90 days, it's,
Okay,
goes to the inactive pile,
okay.
but,
Because that will put us in a little bit of the bind where we would be providing feedback and modifications to a plan to address their comments that hasn't yet gone before the voters to see whether or not they agree with what we wrote. Which, maybe there's a way to do that. And then, obviously, let them know that, we're addressing here, and here's how we intend to address it. Of course, we have to bring this to our voters, and we wouldn't be able to do that any earlier than November if we're lucky.
yeah. I mean, the state doesn't, the state doesn't necessarily care if you voted it in.
Yeah.
I mean, you can submit a plan regardless of whether it's been adopted by the town or not. So, I think as long as we provide them with, here's a proposed changes, I would expect us to see a letter coming back from them that says that, yes, we find that your proposed changes are consistent.
So maybe if we're gonna have a conversation with him, we can sort of tell them how our process needs to work. I mean, if we make a change that the state votes down, the residents vote down the plan because whatever change we made, which I don't think is likely, but that's always the possibility, then we would have to pull back that plan, right?
Right.
So,
Yep. I think, one of the questions that, Michelle and I were talking about was how we move forward, with this. My thought with this is that we just, we re-engage with Tom and Liz and say, all right, Tom and Liz, here's the list.
Yeah.
Because that was part of the contract, was to get a consistent plan,
Right.
Through the state.
absolutely.
And then we set up, we just set up a next meeting with them,
That would be great.
and obviously we'll wind up talking with them before then, to bring forward some proposed modifications and what that might look like.
Yeah, it'd be good if, and I would assume they would know, but if they don't, it'd be good for them to bring, like, they're referencing different parts of the regulations, right?
Right.
I mean, like the first one associated with mobile home parks and manufactured housing, I mean, that's in the free enterprise zone.
Exactly,
So-
right. We already have that. We
So
have
if that's okay, we
portions-
got a portion that's within our growth area. So
Right.
is that suitable? Maybe they just didn't know that. Or
Right.
does the mobile home parks have to be a permitted use versus
No, I think you just have to, you have to show that you have, I mean, some communities actually have designated zones for mobile home parks. We don't, we just have it listed as a use within, within certain zoning districts. And so it's a matter of just doing, I think, the overlay between, here's free enterprise and here's where it overlaps, so that we can show that, yes, we have areas within the growth
Right.
that,
because I would assume you don't have to designate certain parcels, like these parcels are identified.
no, but it'll just sort of naturally show up that way.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it'll be an interesting exercise because, what you want to see is that you have actual developable property that could be that.
Yeah.
If we wind up doing that analysis and find that we don't actually have any developable property, then
That'll be another
that's a
risk
whole,
for us.
that's a whole other conversation, but,
Yeah.
but I don't think,
I would think we do.
I don't think we're gonna see that.
Yeah, I think we're fine. All right. So then, next step is, let's get engaged with Tom and Liz, provide them this information, right? Let them take a look at it, and they attend hopefully they can attend our next meeting. They may have other obligations at this point, but, I guess the point would be, I mean, when their availability would be, if they're not available next meeting, will there be work that we need to do, in other words, in the middle of April, second week in April? Or do we push that all to May?
Is this something they have to get back involved with, or?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that was part of our contract with them, is that they would produce a plan that would meet the consistency goals with the state. So, yeah, I would look for them to do
Got it.
to be engaged in that.
yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, we'll obviously be involved in the review of the language, and, where it goes, where it shows up in the plan.
Okay,
Yeah, I would think that's probably gonna be a May meeting.
okay. Yeah, May 2nd, I'm not traveling, so May 2nd would be good.
May 2nd?
For me, anyways.
Okay.
May 2nd, good for you guys, for another meeting? So
Yeah.
it'd be our first meeting for May. Okay. So anything else we need to discuss on that moment?
No.
No.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly go through the, the other comments if folks want to. If there's anything you wanna, highlight and discuss, we're happy to do that.
Well, I mean, I think number one, the required elements, that piece, when I looked at those, it seemed like pretty reasonable metrics that maybe our committee could take a look at. I think I'd like to do them maybe every 4 years, so that we kind of get 2 reviews done in between having to rewrite the comp plan, but, we could figure out some way of, if we have to, you know, put it in an ordinance or some requirement in order to show the state that we're addressing it. I think I would maybe put it in the ordinance instead of in the plan,
Yeah,
you know? But I think those we can, I mean, one we're already doing, I mean, I think all this information we already have when I looked at it,
right.
right? We're just not really reviewing it in a formal way, right, as a committee. You guys are probably looking at it, but we're not using it to assess how the plan's doing, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
you know, we talked about the housing piece. You know, the strategy for a network of trails, I thought we had pretty much covered for at least non-motorized. I don't know if we ever really talked about motorized trails.
Yeah, I mean, there's not, you know, I mean, it's not something we really got into because there's, you know, I'm not hearing any demand. In fact, I'm hearing typically the opposite, you know, in terms of folks looking for, you know, I'm not hearing anybody say, gosh, you know, I wish we had four-wheeler or snowmobile trails in town,
Well, I
you
mean,
know?
honestly, we do. They use the old railroad line.
That's right, yeah, there's a rail line, there's, you know,
It's
I mean,
not
there's.
set up that way, but no one complains.
Yeah, I mean, there's pieces of the CMP easement, you know,
Yeah.
that, you know, that folks use, you know, for that, and, you know,
Buy
that's
all
not
the time, I hear.
part of a formal network, you know, there's a couple of other areas in town I know that get used that way, but, you know, I don't know that, you know, there's just not like, oh, we need to, we need to
Yeah,
dedicate a lot of time, you know, to setting up, you know, figuring out where to put ATV trails in throughout town, like, that's just not on the radar, I don't think, so.
no, but I mean, is it a strategy we have to address, or is that just,
You know,
I'm not sure?
I would think that we would, we would reference the extensive network of passive recreational trails that the Conservation Trust, you know, has and maintains,
Yeah,
you know, and then just make a comment that at this point, there's not been any demand for motorized, trails, and leave it at that,
Where's that comment?
it's under,
under recreation.
the second piece. They kind of laid out their missing items.
Right.
And, number 3. I mean, I mean, motorized trails, we have them all over the place, they're paved. Right, so,
That's right, we have them, those are called roads.
and geez, honestly, I thought we had addressed the non-motorized in working with, to try to get that whole connected piece from Cape Porpoise up through
Right.
the top. And then obviously, the regional trail system is a little bit out of our scope since it doesn't go through our town.
Yeah, and I mean, the other one, you know, provide educational materials regarding the benefits and protections for landowners allowing public recreational access on their property. I don't know what that means, you know, that means hanging having brochures available for folks at town hall. I mean, some of these things were such minutia, it's like,
Yeah.
is that really a critical item to have written in your comprehensive plan, that will have brochures available telling folks that, you know, that Maine protects property owners from, you know, from liability if they allow for, you know, access, you know, recreational access? I mean, I don't know, but,
Yeah,
I mean, it's something that's covered in statute. It is
Yeah.
something I think that's fairly unique to Maine, you know, but to me, that
We-
wasn't one
we
of the.
put a link on our website that goes to wherever the town reference. It must be a city, I mean, a state.
You know, most of that information you really find, IF&W has most of that
Does it?
information, you know, because most of it really centers around hunting. You
Yeah.
know, is that, you know, folks are,
Sure.
you know, landowners are really protected from, from that liability whenever they allow for public access and hunting on their property, so.
Yeah, as well as the snowmobiling up north,
Right.
you know, it's a big
It's how
deal
you,
there.
it's how you get the trails, right? You know,
Yeah,
it's how
true.
you get those access points and those trails, so.
No, back when we had snow, they used that same path that they now use the motorcycles on, that they run snowmobiles on.
Yeah,
Well, no, they're not like calling out like handicap accessible motorized. I mean, are we?
No.
They haven't gone there.
no,
Yeah, I didn't.
No, I
that
mean-
was like,
that's not something that really falls, in their purview
Okay.
to talk about, I mean, ADA is always a question that comes up.
Yep.
And I mean, I've yet, I think it behooves communities to have, portions of their recreational trails be accessible, but there's not a requirement that says like all of your trails or there's a certain percentage of where you have to, like that's not, I've not come across that.
That's okay.
Number 6 was on locate new public facilities comprising at least 75% of new municipal growth-related capital investments in designated growth areas. I've read that a couple of times. I'm not 100% sure.
I need
Are they
the next.
saying that 75% of our capital investment needs to be in the growth area?
Yeah, for new public facilities.
Okay. I think we're gonna do that fine.
Yeah.
I think 100% of it will be.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, we don't have any massive, new public facilities projects other than, there's, we've been in discussions and there's a working group on a new town hall,
Right.
Looking at that. But, I mean, that's right over here.
Right.
So we're in a growth area, so we
Right.
can check that box. And I think it also, I mean, if a community was doing some significant extensions of public sewer and public water, you'd want to do that in your growth area, but
Yeah, but that would extend our growth area, at least the way ours is defined.
based on our descriptions, yes,
Right,
it would,
so-
yeah, it would change. Yeah, we'd review that, but,
So I think we just gotta point to that.
Right.
I think we got that covered. Coordinate community's land use strategy with other local,
yep, we'll make sure and say nice things about Lee J,
there you go.
that one.
Got that one covered? I think we've got 8 covered. And we have a capital plan.
Yep.
I thought that strategies were dealt with that as well. Now, like I said, we'll have Tom and Liz go through.
Yeah.
We've got to tweak
and-
some words or something to make it clearer for
And
them.
we haven't,
Yeah.
so we also haven't taken
Taken the
this
time,
and
right.
like gone through the plan to be able to say, hey, you missed it, it's here. Because you're right, I mean, I feel like some of these things sound very familiar, like,
Yeah.
feels like we would have said that somewhere. Yep, but,
And 9, you guys need more tools, training, and support. I think that's fine, we can put
I
it in there.
mean, I don't know what to say there. I put a budget together every year. That includes, training. There's a training line in the budget.
Hey,
you know.
this committee bought the planning office's first laptop.
That's right, so,
Right.
yeah, some of those things, again, I just kind of scratch my head at like, really, does this need to be in the comp plan?
Yeah.
But, in all fairness, there are likely communities where they have
Don't.
to be told that,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
hey, A, you need to have a code enforcement officer, and B, you need to make sure that there's funds available to,
Yeah.
send them to training, so.
Okay. Track new development in the community by type and location. Boy. I think we got that covered, Phil. Direct minimum of 75% of new municipal growth-related capital investments into designated growth areas identified in the future land use plans. It's really the same thing.
Yeah,
It's in-
same-
They
it's-
say-
Yeah, you get to
they
pick
say at the
between
top.
6 and
Yeah.
11.
You can almost make
Divide,
That's what
yeah,
they-
yeah,
that's what they
right.
say,
1
though,
and 12,
actually.
6 and 11.
6 or
The
11.
top line.
Right.
You're right,
Yeah.
yeah.
It sounds like a joke, but it actually is.
Right, you could either fix number 6 or number 11, since
You
they're the same
decide.
thing.
Same thing with 1 and 12. You get to
Right,
pick
1 and
one of
12,
the
same
two.
thing, okay. I don't see any showstoppers here, and I don't see anything that I would expect our town folks would have any heartache
Yeah.
on us addressing.
Some of this is just, putting in writing processes that we already have in place, things that we've done before, so.
And how do we,
Others.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said in clarifying others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the 12-page letter where we're urged to incorporate suggestions found in the comments? How do we interpret that sentence?
I would suggest that we have, like, Tom and Liz kind of read through that and see, make some recommendations based on what was written here.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it, when I was reading through was, hey, when you get to doing this, give us a call. We want to help. That's what I was getting, which is good. I mean, it's good to have that information, and maybe we just include, some type of the strategy, consider
and a lot
reaching
of-
out,
A lot of the other pieces were just like, this is a broken link, so replace it with the
Yeah,
new link.
right.
Or the language that was picked out and used was not exactly the correct language that the department would like them to be using. But other than that, everything else, you're right, is pretty minor.
Yeah.
I was looking at like new maps and different viewers and,
I know that the map,
instead of using what you used, use this. I'm looking on page 2 regarding,
Oh, yeah, in other words, some of the maps, I guess we're referencing, or we had, are updated.
right.
oh yeah,
So, but I
it
think
has
we-
been changed
right.
since we initially submitted the plan.
But I
so.
thought didn't we put something in our ordinance that we can modify maps without having to resubmit the plan for?
Right, yeah, some
approval?
of these are just data.
Yeah,
We're
like
just
data stuff and
data-driven
tables.
maps.
They get updated, so we don't have to go back and resubmit.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the, and I think, I get the point, about, incorporating, including web addresses, but at the same time, like, we know those change on a regular
time,
basis,
yeah.
so, but if that checks the box,
To check, yeah, we'll do that to check the box.
yeah, we're happy to do that.
I read through the public access part, and they felt like we weren't addressing public access to inland waters. This is what I was reading in there, and
You're saying inland waters?
and I was trying to think where where would that really be? I mean,
Well, right, that's,
we don't have a lot of inland water,
yeah,
and
and,
where we do, we do have trails from the Conservation Trust that kind of,
Yeah.
new phone, I haven't figured out how to turn all this stuff.
there's in terms of something that you could really use a boat, in terms of
Oh.
inland waters, you've got a stretch of the Batson,
Okay,
that's between dams,
Right.
okay.
but that's it,
Yeah.
and that's, I personally don't think that that's a significant enough piece of, body of water that we would need to provide some
Right.
type of public access to.
Right.
At one of the bridges there, if you really wanted to, you could, you could get down,
Yeah,
but it's not something that, that would be like, oh, we need to figure out how to get a kayak launch onto this, maybe mile stretch, if that, of what I would classify as navigable,
yeah,
water.
Yeah, even the Conservation Trust, like, we go hunting there and it's, there's trees down and.
Sure, it's all streams,
Yeah, yeah,
primarily, it's
yeah,
streams.
yeah.
right, exactly. But, they definitely went through this thing, and it's some good feedback, I thought, from, what is that group? It was a bunch of folks.
I had no idea there were that many trout streams in town.
Yeah, yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 3 that are stocked.
Yeah, a lot of them they're stocked.
MNAP and
Gonna get a
MDIFW.
fishing license?
Thought it was a nice thing that the guy from the DOT wrote. Mr. Stephen Cole. Once-in-a-generation document.
Warner, is this available in Town Hall in case anybody watching wants to
Yes.
see this?
Yep. Yeah, we
Is-
can, have that
Or
available.
posted on our page?
Yeah, we ought to post it.
Yes, we can do that. Yep, I wanted to get through kind of our, introduction of it here.
Yeah. And then we have, I guess we missed a farm, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't know how we missed Melinda's farm,
Yeah,
What is that, the mom?
5 acre.
5 acre
I
farm.
thought we included it. I'm
Yeah,
so certain.
Yeah,
I thought we had missed it and then included it.
yeah, I felt like that was mentioned.
What was the date of her September 23rd?
Yep.
so we apologize for that, that's for sure.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, I did find Lee J's comments about the town of Arundel interesting, any cooperation. Ironically, I just got an email today on debating on the boundary between Arundel and Kennebunkport.
Really?
Yeah, in terms of who gets to review what for some of the trolley museum's projects.
Sure.
So
Let them pay for it.
it all depends, which side of the rail line that you consider the southerly boundary, So I know what I consider the southerly boundary, but
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get this to Tom and Liz and get their feedback and post the information on the website for
Yep.
folks to take a peek at.
yep, we can do that.
All right. Any other discussion on the
Thank you.
1 and 2? Okay, now we have review of goals and strategies assigned to the GPC. This is all we gave ourselves?
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah, light load, guys, come on.
Well, that's what happens when you write the plan, right?
Okay, well, that's number 20s. So we ought to just have that as a checkpoint, right? I mean, we're driving our future growth areas based off of infrastructure at the moment, unless we decide to make a change there, but that's what's in the comp plan, right? Within 1,000 feet of, so when we're evaluating that, we have to take assess what that impact would be from a climate change standpoint,
Right.
okay?
Yeah, and that's something that, if we want, we could do that we can do that at a future meeting. We can pull together some of the projections, and just do an overlay with that onto the growth areas, and just have a discussion about what that actually includes in terms of land area, so we can visually see what that is,
Yeah, that'd be good
Yeah.
to do.
so.
Because the other thing we want to do is we don't want to put a sewer system in a place that's going to have an issue with climate change,
Yeah,
right? So the town is heading that way. We want to somehow be able to ensure there's a review, at least understand the potential impact.
I think in a lot of areas, what you're gonna find is that we, when we designated kind of growth areas into bigger blocks, we didn't
We didn't-
fine tune it in
we
the
didn't
sense of like, this land area isn't part of it. We did it based using the parcel layer. We didn't use, like a natural resources layer to carve some of that land out. So you might have salt marshes that are on property that are in a designated growth area, but we know that's, there's other regulatory actions
Yeah,
that
exactly.
preclude that from being developed, so,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we can have that, we'll do maybe a GIS kind of workshop with that, one meeting where we can
See all
go
those
through-
layers.
Yeah, we're right, where you can see the layers and we can kind of talk about really what that practically looks like.
Yeah.
But we also ought to have that as part of our, every 2 years, we take a look at potential changes. So we need to take that into consideration as well when we're doing that. Okay, so the next one, hazard mitigation. Continue to incorporate climate adaptation into future updates to the comprehensive plan. That's kind of a no-brainer.
Well, that's just something on the list for the next plan.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking, is there's, yeah, that's plan. Those actions they recommended, did they include anything on? The degree to which future land use plan strategies have been implemented, percent of municipal growth-related capital investment, location amount of new development in relation to communities' designated growth areas, amount of critical natural resources, rural, waterfront areas protected through acquisition, easement, or other measures, not necessarily. I think just to help the next committee to get set up to be successful,
Right.
in case none of us are on the committee at that time. You know, we could have, you know, sort of a review that we're looking at that on a periodic basis for consideration in the next, and even if we're leaving some type of note or record, you know, let's say in 5 years we find out the models have changed and things are gonna happen more quickly, hopefully more slowly, but if they happen more quickly, that's gonna maybe force some changes,
Right.
right?
Do I need to plant a palm tree, or can you consider the oak tree
Possibly.
still?
Possibly. Sell your sleds.
Get my side by side.
Okay. Then the last one, review the impact of growth permits on a periodic basis to determine effectiveness. Well, we do that. Sort of. And that's one of the requirements, so. Boy, we could do more than that.
This gives us more time to hound
Yeah.
the other,
Yeah,
groups to
I mean, I think we,
get their work done.
that first one, that required element piece, I think that should come to us. We were talking about that prior, right? So they kind of do an assessment of how's the plan doing against those elements on a periodic basis. Maybe we can look at other things that we can add to that.
Right.
Because we will be getting the feedback on how other committees are doing on the action items they agreed to address or consider. Right, we'll be getting those on some, hopefully an annual frequency. Good. Any other discussions on goals and strategies? There are none?
Not here?
All right. So the last we have is the discussion on warrant articles.
All right. So, I believe we talked about this a little bit at our last meeting. And so, as you all know, we have, Growth Planning Committee gets to look at, warrant articles, proposed, land use ordinance amendments, and, we look for, your all's recommendation on whether or not it's consistent with the comp plan. I think some of these things sometimes aren't addressed to that level in the comp plan, so, to some degree, and I think it's fine to just, to state that one way or the other, that it's not inconsistent with the plan, but,
Yeah.
but I'll go through and kind of explain, what we're doing, and the purpose behind these changes.
Okay.
So the first one that I'll grab is the proposed amendment, dealing with private road construction. And so, a couple of things.
Article 6, Article?
Correct, yes, Article 6. So a couple of items you'll see here are proposed as changes. One, we've added a table in here that has some diagrams outlining some cul-de-sac, hammerhead, and a Y hammerhead designs for both a 16-foot and 20-foot traveled width. And so these designs, we actually had one of the consulting engineers that we work with, we provided the technical stats of the new ladder truck that the town has committed to lease purchase. And so we had them create, create these engineering specs for turnarounds so that, as we get new private roads or private roads that are extended, so that, they can be designed in such a way that they'll be consistent with what the ladder truck needs to turn around, so. And that's really the biggest change here. We also just codified a little bit better what a process that the planning board already does, whenever they review private roads. So it's common for them to ask for input from the fire chief. So I just went ahead and said, they can ask for comment from the fire chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize it wasn't there already.
Right, I mean, it's a
always
common,
done,
it's
yeah.
a common sense item, but I said, you know what? I said, I don't want to run into an applicant saying, why did you ask the chief? I mean, not that
Yeah.
anyone would say that, but,
Yeah.
it's always good to have practice and ordinance be as
Yeah.
consistent as possible, so. Yeah, so that's what those changes are. Does anyone have any questions on those?
Nope, looks good,
Okay.
no problem.
So, so then the next one, this is this is a combination of a number of different articles. So you have, Article 2, so this is the, land use ordinance amendments regarding accessory apartments. And so what you have here, what's driving this, in particular is, and we had talked about this before, LD 2003, that recently enacted housing statute, that communities are, at least the way it's written today, that communities are required to bring their ordinances into compliance with by July 1 of this year. So we looked at the language in the statute. A lot of items, in the statute required rulemaking, which is still a piece that's in process with the state. Second, the state was to have a grant application available for communities so that they could apply for grants for technical assistance to get to have their ordinances reviewed and have proposed language updates. That application hasn't been created yet. So there's a couple of pieces that are just, it doesn't practically work to have a July 1 deadline. And so there's actually a proposed amendment to that law that would bump it out for another 2 years. But, that has to, it has to go through the whole legislative process. I don't anticipate that there's going to be any pushback to do that. I think there's a lot of support to give towns some additional time for it, but there's also a couple of other pieces of legislation out there that would modify LD 2003. So, I'm of the mindset of, we'll sit back and kind of see what happens. But
So what's in red here, is this just a suggestion?
no, so this is the actual warrant article. So but what we did do is we moved forward with proposed changes to the ADU language. So as you know, we already permit accessory dwelling units. And so everything that I've seen that has come forward in proposals at the legislature doesn't affect this.
Right.
So amendments that are out there, there's no amendments out there that would change this requirement other than maybe a push out. So I've left this as, as a warrant article to bring at least the ADU piece into compliance.
Okay.
So, and so this is also has gone through legal review, and so some of the tweaks here are just recommended language changes from the town attorney, and that's really what you see in the definition section. The independently conveyed piece that language is what's suggested by, the town attorney.
In the accessory use or structure definition,
Right.
isn't a word missing? Conveyed except to the extent permitted by law? That's how it reads
Yeah.
in the
Correct.
following one.
Yep. That's a good catch.
And why does it say permitted as opposed to required? I assume your philosophical approach is we don't want to
Right.
allow people to sell
Yeah.
off these things.
Yeah, we don't want to, but if we have to, then it has to follow, a process that is a permitted process in law. And this is one of those pieces that when I discussed this with Amy Chow, we went back and forth on what a conveyance, what would a conveyance like this look like? Arguably, this would, I think practically this would be more of a condo type style of ownership, if there was gonna be any kind of a conveyance piece, but.
Timeshare.
Yeah, but so it was her recommendation that this was the language that needed to show up, in order to keep us out of potential hot water. So that's what we have. And then the next couple of pages, what you see here are really just the land use tables where we go through all the additionals, all of the zones. Some of this is just, is housekeeping language.
So it's permitted use everywhere, not just,
Permitted use everywhere.
doesn't have to go for approval through.
Doesn't have to go through a planning board
Right.
site plan as a conditional use. Yep. And so the next really substantive change deals with the size. So currently we have this requirement that the primary has to be at least 1,625, and then you have this calculation of minimum of 600, maximum of 800. So the statute specifies that ADUs can be a minimum of 190 square feet. They didn't have a maximum. There's not a maximum, so we just kept our maximum of 800 square feet in there.
Okay.
We kept in there that an ADU needs to be occupied as a primary residence. I can tell you some of the other language is just from a practical perspective difficult to track or enforce realistically. So,
Sure.
So we simplified this, to just state that ADUs are intended to be occupied as primary residences.
So historically, people have here in shore communities, lived in the main house and moved to the back house, the back garage, the whatever, either because they always needed to do that financially or something happened and they needed to do that financially.
Yep.
So the primary residence for 9 months of the year, say, would be the front house or the main house, and they might move to the garage in the summer. And that's being done at Goose Rocks.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how would that? It's done because it's been grandfathered in
Yeah, I mean,
in
this
properties.
Preclude any of those existing circumstances like that. I mean, this language here is going to apply to newly approved
Right,
ADUs.
I understand that, and I'd like to help out the economically, someone who could stay in their house by being able to do this and figures, we can put an apartment over there and create an ADU. And it would not be used seasonally. In that scenario, it wouldn't be used for a short-term rental, but the main house might be used as a short-term rental. That would be a benefit for some people. So I'm thinking that would not be possible, or would it be possible under this change?
Well, under this language here, we're just making it clear that the ADU isn't eligible as
Right.
as a short-term rental, and, we don't address, then the usage of
I think it's
the
addressed.
primary.
The
Right, no, I'm
primary,
just-
well,
I'm
it
just-
says primary residence shall be defined as more than 6 months, so they gotta live in the primary residence at least 6 months. That's the way I'm reading it.
No, I think it says the garage apartment, let's
Right,
say,
the accessory is.
has to be a 6-month,
Has to be,
and this person couldn't meet that test because they're in the front house for 9 months a year. They're in the big house, and then they create a small apartment to go to so they can,
Just check out the apartment every day.
for us, really,
No,
what this
but-
means
It's hard to,
practically is that, the ADU isn't eligible for it's not eligible
A
for a
license,
short-term
right.
rental license, but conceivably, the primary would be.
right, but I think I can see under this language, and I don't have a solution just yet, but I can see under this language, while that's the intent, someone would say, well, who's going to live in the ADU when you create it? And the person says, well, I'm not going to rent it out. I'm going to move there myself. And yet that would be contrary to this language and technically a violation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a.
You're not going to require, obviously, if you give somebody an ADU license, there isn't any requirement here that I report to you who my tenant is.
That's right. And that's
Um,
not really the.
I understand that.
That's not the intent of that, I think we've, it's important to put language in there to spell out what the intended usage, of it is, but the reality of it is that we're not, we don't police rental property other than dealing
Responding
with
to a
short-term
complaint,
rentals,
right.
Piece of it. I can tell you, we have ADUs in town that that folks have constructed, and as you said, some of them don't actually intend to rent them out at all. They serve at, they, I think at times have served just as.
Yeah, overflow, whatever.
This is overflow for when we have family that comes to visit.
Sure.
And that's their place. And so, to some degree also, like, cleaning some of this language out helps kind of that unintended, that's not the intent, is to you can't have grandma come and stay for a month, in the ADU there, that's
Any
not.
family members?
I would think that, it's
Right.
part of the property, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm not renting it to anybody, whether I'm actually sleeping in that bed every night, or I'm sleeping in my primary residence bed, I'm living it. That's my area.
That's right.
I can go in there and watch TV if I want.
You can do whatever you want, I don't
Right.
care.
Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be the government.
So I think that.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that language is fine with that, then. I think they'd be covered.
I see what you're saying.
I
though.
think the
That's not
language
what
would be
I-
fine if you said that, do we still have the requirement that to have an accessory dwelling unit, you have to be the main unit, you have to be there as a full-time?
No, actually, we didn't have that in there. That, you're thinking of the rumor, the residential rental accommodation piece was that, somebody had to be there in residence, while the rooms were being rented.
Yeah, I thought I had a neighbor who built an ADU in their property, above the books, and she was the primary resident. And then when she sold, we used to have the requirement that said you lose it on
Yeah,
transfer.
Right, and
And you've taken that out,
that's struck, yes.
right?
Yeah.
So,
It's another one
But
of
I
those kind of practical issues of where, you give somebody, it's this odd mix of between a license and a permit. So you've given
Right.
someone a permit
No,
to
no.
construct something and then the license to use it.
but the successor, the guy who bought the property, it was a vacation rental. So it was his understanding that he could not have an ADU because he was a resident of Massachusetts.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
he would not be eligible to apply. So my question is, Is that still,
No, that's also being struck.
okay.
Yep.
I-
Yeah.
I'm just ready, I don't know
Well,
how I
and
feel about it, but,
one of the reasons as well why, why some of this language was struck was because there's other sections of LD 2003, that, that allude to a fair bit of making sure that your ordinances don't violate certain fair housing components of federal law. And so, and that's why I chose to strike, some of this language in terms of, the main residency requirements are needing to provide, proof that you registered a vehicle or, or something of that nature. So, and council is good with that.
but why not, since you've said here, you have to live there 6 months, it has to be a primary residence. Why not say that either has to be a primary residence, like we used to say? An accessory apartment shall be occupied as a primary residence. Primary residence is defined as 6 months per year. So we've made it more limiting. And the old language allowed, the person who could never afford to go back into which happens all the time at the beach. They can't afford to keep the place up unless they rent the big house because there's 10 members of the family who own a share of the house. And yet the
Yeah,
grandmother or
but-
somebody,
Recognize that this, so for those properties down at the beach, this doesn't affect that.
I'm not talking about the historic ones, I'm talking about giving everybody essentially the same rights, whether you did it before and were grandfathered or you're now. And I'm just wondering, what's the downside of saying either property has to be a primary residence? Why make it the accessory has to be a primary residence?
I think part of it is because, this is just a standard for accessories, and really the intent of this is just to develop standards that deal just specifically with the ADU, and not extending, some type of restriction onto the primary. Meaning this just deals directly with the ADU itself. And again,
But
some of that.
I kind of see where he's coming from. Is there the possibility that that could happen if it's on that same property? Like you could make that switch, you could make that accommodating, and I agree with him. If we're gonna, it should be across the board. Everybody should have the same ability.
Hey, here's the thing, though. I mean, what you're asking for is impractical.
Well, so isn't most of the stuff that we're trying to do, so.
When you say,
Honestly, I think these are great suggestions, but if half the stuff isn't even gonna work, we're ratifying, we're doing this,
Well,
why are we, like,
No,
you're being
let me explain, what I'm saying here is that, you're describing circumstances that occur in town. So if we had to draw up language and ordinance that addressed every particular circumstance, I mean, I'd have a book this thick,
Sure.
and, that's what I'm saying is impractical, so, I mean, each property has its own history and its own path in terms of how it's been developed and how it's been used. And so each property really gets looked at on its own individual basis and under those circumstances. Each one has its own, you have to look at it based on historically how it's operated, and how it's been built or developed. And recognize too that this deals with, so we had a standard, or we have a standard, and ADUs are currently regulated. Any ADUs that are constructed, newly constructed, are dealt with under that language. This language is going to deal with ADUs that are constructed after the date of approval. So this goes to the voters, should the voters choose to vote for it and it passes, then this applies then to ADUs that are constructed, after, whatever the town meeting date is in July 2023. It's not a retroactive, it's not a retroactive law, that goes back and re-regulates, grandfathered or pre-existing units. Because if you had to create an ordinance that really addressed all of those circumstances of things that you had before, I mean, that's the impractical.
I guess I'm still trying to, I understand the goal of not wanting these to become short-term rentals. And the town, under the statute, was allowed to do that, which I think everybody in town, or many people in town, would agree with, so that we're just not bringing in, more short-term rentals. So I get that, but I still don't quite gather why the language was practical today, but now you're saying it's impractical. I'm just saying, just bring back in the language which we used to have, which we have today, which says one of them has to be a primary residence.
Well, the language we had before that says actually both of them had to be lived in as a primary residence. It wasn't a one or,
It says either the primary residence or a converted accessory apartment shall be occupied by the owner of the property as the owner's primary residence.
right. And then it went on to say that both the primary and accessory shall be occupied as primary residences.
So
So that wouldn't really allow, the way the language was written, if you had, both had to be primary, it wouldn't have allowed the folks to move into the accessory apartment for a period of time while they rented out the main house. This actually, I think, lets them do that. But also let a company buy a home and do that, if they can find somebody just to rent the accessory apartment.
sure,
Right.
So,
which is a good thing, which is fine. They can have a
as long as
6-month,
it doesn't,
if we're getting year-round housing
yeah, it's
out
a
of
risk
it,
that it could.
that's great.
We could lose some year-round housing because of that, though, right?
I mean, this,
True.
Yeah, we don't want that.
That's which we don't want, it's an unintended
Right.
consequence. That's the only thing I was thinking there was, I
Yeah.
could build the accessory apartment onto mine, go live in that, and then rent out the house
right.
Weekly.
weekly. If I could get a short-term rental.
But you can't get a short-term rental
I
license.
can't get a permit, then I can't do that.
Yeah.
But I could do it long-term.
Yeah, but
Right,
this
you could
here
do-
really just applies that to the ADU, because before, it was, either shall be occupied by the owner of the property as the owner's primary residence, so either the primary or the ADU. But then beyond that, it also says that both of them needed to be occupied as primary residences. So, the language here actually removes one of those,
Right.
restrictions.
And it doesn't even actually say that the owner needs to occupy either of them.
Correct.
So now they can both be rented long-term.
Yeah,
Portland had something like that, 'cause I
Yeah.
had a friend of mine who rented it was a house, had 3 apartments in it, and they were all long-term, and then somebody else bought it, and they were allowed to turn all but one into, nightly rentals.
yeah.
And so
Yeah, I mean,
he
this-
was left, and then he quickly found another place to live.
If you had a,
Sick and tired of,
if you had a second home and you wanted to construct an ADU to it, this would allow you to do that and rent both of those as primaries,
Right, sure.
without having to, you
Be there.
personally living in those.
Is there a definition of long-term in here? Is it more than 6 months?
Yeah, we define primary as that 6-month.
So you're paying your taxes here.
But under the
Yep.
short-term rental ordinance, that just governs under 30 days, 30 days or less, right?
And that's, right, correct, that's just for the purpose of the license,
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't need a license if I rent for 31 days.
correct.
So if I have 3 renters in the summer,
Right.
I could do that in the big house, but not, well, unless I had a winter rental.
Right.
Rent to school board members.
Yeah.
I think it'll be work.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so moving on, some of the other things that we're striking out, the restriction regarding, the home occupation language.
Good.
And then also removing the language about the filing, the notice with the
Yep.
Registry of Deeds.
Just gotta tell Governor Mills.
And then also the further language that talked about, if it was being constructed in a this was if it's in a pre-existing structure that doesn't meet setbacks, and then also the devotion of a certain amount of floor area to other uses as well. So struck that language as well. The next piece of it, and again, this is language that was specifically in the statute, was the requirement for additional off-street parking. The statute specifically says that communities can't require any additional off-street parking for ADUs.
Well, that's a smart thing. For at least, all the small communities with very tight roads and stuff, they can't require that.
Yeah, and, I struggled a little bit with that one at first, but, I can tell you, just as a general rule, I think the properties that are gonna be eligible for this to begin with, all the ones that I've seen have excess
Yeah,
in terms of parking. So,
but you're gonna run into it though, right? Someone's gonna say, oh.
yeah, I mean,
parking
there's
on
the,
Mills Road.
there's a potential for that. I just, the practical, the practical piece of it is that, we weren't really seeing that was an issue.
Yeah. That should be struck from the LD 2003 though.
Yeah, and then also just further language that just ensured that, that it was clear that it was also something permitted as an accessory use on non-conforming lots of record. So.
But if they don't have two spots, if it's a non-conforming that meets other requirements, and they don't have two spots, they couldn't have they don't have two spots now because the rule didn't
No,
exist.
it wouldn't apply, because if we can't require any additional parking for the ADU, that's not a condition for a denial. It's not part of it wouldn't be part of the performance standards. So I can't apply a parking performance standard to something that says specifically I can't require any parking for it.
So then I'm confused. Each single-family dwelling shall be provided with 2 off-street parking spaces prospectively.
Yeah.
Accessory apartments don't have to have additional.
Correct.
So I have no parking right now.
So you're
Let's say.
grandfathered,
Yeah.
I'm grandfathered.
right?
Yeah.
Because you existed prior to whatever date it was.
So you think the second sentence, so I'm
Correct.
not bound by the first sentence? if
That's
I-
not bound by the first sentence. Yeah.
I would not think that. I would think because you have to have a new application for an accessory dwelling unit, you're going to put them through the ropes to,
Yeah, but I don't
you have to show a site plan.
but I don't review the primary as part of the application. It's like I don't, somebody comes in to apply for, for a detached garage.
Yeah,
I don't review the single-family home. I review the application for the detached garage.
but you look at lot coverage and side yards and everything else.
I look at it to see that it's, right, that it's consistent overall,
Right,
with the zoning.
Can you give an example? Because I'm like, so if they don't have enough room for off-street parking, how do they have room for an accessory dwelling?
Well, they might have it already in the building.
Yeah,
They're
Yeah,
gonna,
it could
they're gonna
be a-
subdivide
gonna-
the existing house. They're gonna take, the
You mean renovate? like,
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
existing
Yeah, that's-
footprint.
yeah, that's
Okay,
the
I
intent
see.
of the
That's
statute to
That's
allow,
the example that I want, yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could have a situation where you've got a single-family home that has one parking spot, you know, and they come in and do, and submit a permit application to do a renovation, and an interior reno that would create, you know, an ADU. You know, with the statute, I can't require any additional parking as part of the condition of that ADU permit.
Yeah, okay. That was a perfect example, though. If you're not changing the footprint,
But they can change the footprint,
Oh, you could, if you have
Sure.
the,
yeah.
if you meet the requirements.
But they gotta do the lot coverage, or they can change the footprint?
Well,
This
so
is all
nothing
okay.
in that statute, you know, gives them an allowance to exceed the lot coverage.
Okay.
So, you know, all of that still, you know, they still have to meet the, you know, the same setback standards and things of that nature.
But,
So if it was a
this-
non-conforming lot, they can't just add,
Correct,
By
that's
doing
right. They
setback.
still have to comply with the coverage and the setbacks. You know, that's still, you know, that's, you know,
they
and
can do it internally, but they can't do it externally.
right, so down at Goose Rocks where it's 40,000 square feet, and there are very few lots that meet
Yeah.
40,000 square feet, no one is gonna be able to build a new structure.
Well, and you have, you know, in addition to that, you also have shoreline zoning, you know.
No, I realize that,
The
yeah.
statute, you know, was pretty clear that they had to be consistent with shoreline zoning, which gives you the dwelling unit density, that 40,000 square foot per unit dwelling unit density. You know, so really the ADU piece, practically speaking, you know, for the majority of Goose Rocks doesn't really apply, you know, because the majority of it's in the shoreline zone. You know, so, you know, until you get into the peripheries.
was there anything in that state law that dictated you had to change those setbacks or anything?
No, but it did say that we couldn't have anything that was more restrictive than what we currently, you know, than what we have for a single-family home. You know, so if we say single-family home is 20-15-15, we couldn't say an ADU has to be, you know, 30-20-20,
Yeah.
Okay.
you know. I do suspect once we go through a bit more in the rulemaking with LD 2003 that you'll likely see an amendment coming forward that will change the setback requirements for two families. Right now, we have a 40-foot front setback and 20-foot sides. I don't really know why, you know, but that's always been in the language. But I suspect that with LD 2003, those setbacks will have to be changed to the 20-15-15 as well. So, I mean, there's no practical reason as to why you would have a 40-foot front setback or 20-foot sides for a two-family, but,
Just make it harder.
Just looking at a bigger building, just,
yeah. Right, because you still have, I mean, you still gotta meet your lot coverage, your height, and all your other space and bulk standards, so, but that's what's been on the books for
Okay.
years, so. But I think that'll probably be a future amendment.
thank you.
So you need a vote on this, on whether it's consistent or,
Yeah, I mean, I think if that's something you all wanna do tonight, that's fine. If, you know, if we wanna do that at the, well,
Can
I
you wait
say
till
do
May or
that at the
not?
next meeting. I mean, sooner rather than later, I think would be better. That way it's done. But, and then we can tell the clerk that the board has, or that the committee has looked at this and made a determination.
what's your guys' thoughts? I mean, that first one, obviously, I think meets the requirements, or is consistent with the plan.
Yeah.
You know, when you start talking about safety and health and our emergency and so forth, so.
You know, and
gotta
as
be able
far
to
as
fire
the,
trucks down there.
as far as the ADU language too, it's, you know, I think, you know, I would think of it in the sense of like, if we were starting from scratch on creating an ADU standard, you know, this is a bit of a fine tuning and a, you know, I think, very clearly is more permissive than what we've had on the books for a while.
I think in general, it's consistent. Got concerns about the parking piece and what that could, there's nothing in the language that would stop us from writing an ordinance that you can't park on the street. Not that I'm saying we do that, but anywhere.
Well, it's specific, it talks about, it's on the lot parking, it's,
So they can park on the grass.
well, no, I'm saying it's on premise parking. So,
I assume,
well, I'm sorry, it says whenever you see a reference to off-street parking, it means on your lot. That folks are required to take care of it, on their property. Some communities make, if there's plenty of on-street parking, then they make, they may not have an off-street parking requirement. That's probably a
I know
sore
you're looking at me.
That's a sore subject for
Yeah.
you.
I don't have a parking space and it's terrible.
At least you have a place to live.
Right.
Well, if we say that this is not consistent with the plan, then our plan's not consistent with the state, so. We don't wanna say that, so. I think in general, it's consistent with the plan. I mean, we're trying to improve the affordable housing in our town, right?
Yes.
Affordable workplace, however you wanna call it. So I would make a motion that these are both consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You got it. All right. Any other business to bring up?
No, I think what we'll do is we'll get everything over to Tom and Liz, and get some feedback from them, and I think we agreed our next meeting was going to be on,
May 2nd.
2nd.
Yep. Yeah, hopefully they can meet that day.
Yeah, so we'll be in touch if we need to change that date.
Yeah.
All right,
All right. Take a motion, Paul.
I move we adjourn at 7:13 or 14.
Second?
second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all.
yeah.